Wairarapa, wairarapa. Wairarapa te rangi I runga nei, wairarapa te papa I raro nei, wairarapa te kahui ariki, te kahui tipua, te kahui tauira, tuku ana, tuku ana. Tuku ana te reo kia rere, tuku ana te kupu kia taka, tuku ana te take kia mau ueha. Ueha, ueha, ueha nuku, ueha rangi. Ueha tāne nui ārangi, tāne whakapiripiri, nā I toko te rangi ki runga nei, kia tū hā. Kia tū ki ana rangi, tū ki ana nuku. Ka tangi te hau, ka mātau, ka ao, ka awatea, he ao mārama, tihei mauri ora. Mai ngā wai, rarapa o te karu o te ika māui. Ka rere, ka pari, korua mahanga te awa, ki te tāpere nui o whātonga, ko ngā maunga o tararua, ko tōku korowai, ko ōku tapuai, ki rangi whakaomaoma, ko whakaoriori, te kāinga ko te whiti, o Wairarapa, te tūranga waiwai, ko te Ataahia tēnei mo Kahurangi. Morena tātou katoa, and welcome into session number 4 of Kahurangi here on Arrow FM. You're here with Te Ataahia Hurihanganui. Welcome in. Tēnā no tātou katoa. Tirohia atua matariki kua noho I ngā puke o tau toru. Kua mōhio tātou ko ia te kairuri o te tau, tahi kia pipiri. Behold Matariki rising upon the swell of Orion's belt, for we know Matariki measures the year during the first month of Pipiri. This is Te Ataahia for Kahurangi on Arrow FM. This is session 4 and our last session this season for Maramataka and Matariki. Welcome on in. I'm really happy to be here today. I was just speaking to Michael of Arrow about the wonderful morning I've had with my lovely husband. We celebrate our anniversary today, 10 years since we were married in Italy, and we decided to do something fitting for Matariki in celebration of us being so far away from the place of our marriage, but so very much present in the place that we met each other and have created our whānau. So we went along to the REP Wairarapa Matariki event, held first at 5:30 a.m. from the Carterton Event Centre, with our kaumātua, my uncle Ra Smith of Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa Rangitāne, and Becky Bateman, our local astronomer and expert in the night sky. We were a busload of people who then drove out to a beautiful place in the Gladstone countryside to spot Matariki in the beautiful night sky. But on the way, of course, Uncle Ra treated us to a number of our local histories and the beautiful stories that make up the landscape and the natural environment that we call home. Nō reira, he mihi aroha tēnei kia koe e te rangatira, kia koe e te matua. Uncle Ra, tēnā koe, o tira tēnā kōrua ko Bebeki mo o ko kōrua kōrero matua, kōrero whakahirahira mo tēnei wā o te tau. If you're just tuning in, ko te paraire e te iwa o hurai, rua mano rua te kaumatahi. Let's set our scene for this morning. We are, of course, Friday, and we're in the beginning of July, but we've actually ended part of our season. You would have heard my chant at the beginning of this section, and I just wanted to acknowledge Professor Rangimā Tāmua of Living by the Stars for his resources, many of which I have gained insight from and knowledge about Maramataka, our lunar calendar, and many of his resources I use in my workshops, of course, as a reo teacher and as a Te Ao Māori cultural advisor and consultant for education. He does have a list of chants, and that chant talks about Matariki's rising during the first month of Pipiri. Pipiri is actually the twin star that rises at the coldest time of the year, and that twin star is called Gemini in the Northern Hemisphere. I am a Gemini, so very fitting. And we call it Pipiri. So the lovely story about Pipiri is what's actually happening on the land. We know that it's cold, so we can imagine that many moons ago, our tūpuna were huddled together, trying to keep warm, trying to keep safe, and just being mindful and present in this time of wānanga. Of course, wānanga means to discuss and to plan and to converse about the time ahead and to wait for the signs, the tohu of the year. One of those signs, of course, was Matariki. I do want to also acknowledge what's happening in our our lunar calendar, ko mutu whenua o Pipiri, tēnei wā. Anō reira whakarongo mai, a ki e nei kōrero mai te hōtaka o tuhi, me whai whakaro he wā ngū tēnei. O tira he wā tau, he wā mo te karakia, te ako whakapapa, te ako pepeha. Whakaoti ngā mahi, kāre anō kia oti. He wā whakaroaro me te arotake i ngā piki me ngā heke i te wā pā kahukahu. Whakakaha i o whanaungatanga, whakatā i tēnei wā māru e heke mai nei. Whai whakaro ki o kupu me o mahi, ka puta tonu mai ngā kitenga ahakoa te pō tangotango. So Pipiri, like I said, really important time because traditionally we were in that large collective, that intergenerational living. In the modern context, we can replicate that by being really mindful of gathering and of being together with our loved ones, with the people around us that are most important. And I've certainly seen that in Wairarapa this week, including the event today. So thank you, Reap Wairarapa, and in particular Trish Hawkins, for organising such a wonderful event, and to all of the kura, all of the kohanga, all of the ECE centres and schools who have led the community through a number of wonderful gatherings this week during our time of Matariki. So just to translate the reading about Mutu Whenua, we are in the very, very last lunar phase of Pipiri, and we've come out of our atua phases. So we had Tangaroa on the 2nd of July, That was about 4 lunar phases, and then we had o Tāne, and then we had o Rongonui, our atua. Now these atua lunar phases are rich, they're abundant, they're high energy, they tell us to be out in nature, to be collecting, to be touching and physical with our natural environment. They tell us to be out and about, learning as much as we can from the outside world. Well, mutu whenua has the word mutu in it. It means everything's coming to a close. So it's a time to learn, it's a time to breathe and be still, to think about who we are, where we come from. So whakapapa is a big theme, if you like, of today's energy. We're in a bit of a low energy, so we might be feeling a little bit tired after all of the abundance of our atua moons, and we're going into whiro. So tomorrow, the 10th of July, is whiro. Now, whiro is one of our atua Māori, and I'll be talking about some of our atua a little bit later on in the show. But whiro is the atua Māori who is often associated with evil energy. He's a disruptor. He likes to cause calamity. So please stay safe tomorrow if you are travelling. If you can, avoid travel, even better. And stay as close to home and to loved ones as you can for at least the next couple of days as we move from Pipiri into Hongongoi, our second lunar month. But right now, as I reflect, I thought this show would be a really nice wrap-up if we bring in some of your voices. So over the last week, I've been collecting questions from the public and from different groups of people I've been working with. Now, these questions, of course, have been many. I've kind of collated them and summarised them into themes, and throughout the show today, I will hopefully be answering those questions. So one of the questions that has come up a number of times in my workshops for Maramataka through Reorua Limited, my company, has been how do we best represent the star in the Matariki cluster, which is about letting go of loss. Now, everyone is going to have their own interpretation of that star Pohutukawa and how we represent and how we acknowledge and how we are mindful of what to do during Pohutukawa. But I do want to just talk about Pohutukawa a little bit in the way that I understand it. So Pohutukawa is one of the 9 stars of Matariki and is the one that for a very long time in our national curriculum was actually left out. And this is one of the whakatauki I've heard about Pohutukawa. Ka ara mai a Pohutukawa, ka hokinga mahara ki te hunga kua whetūrangi hia. When the star Pohutukawa appears, we remember those people who have passed away over the year, and we acknowledge their lives. We use this whakatauki to express our condolences to those who have lost friends and families during this time, and we reflect on their lives and the beautiful memories we've shared with them. At the time of Matariki, during the correct lunar phases of our atua, we sing, chant, or yell the names of those lost ones to the sky. And we allow the burden and the heaviness of grief to lift from us. The grief will remain forever, but the heaviness of grief does not have to stop us, so that we can move into the next season ready and prepared to tackle the plans and the aspirations that we set forth. So with that in mind, and with my very emotional voice this morning, I'd like to bring you a lovely song by one of my favourite Māori artists, Rob Ruha, I te pō, whakarongo mai.
Oh irunga ki ora hiki o nui te wai ho mai au moke moke ai i te
Haere, haere, haere atu rā, hoki atu ki te pō, kia whetū rangitia. Some of you may have heard parts of that poroporoaki or farewell mihi, a greeting to acknowledge those who have passed on. Kia whetū rangitia. May they become stars. It is the pohutu kawa star that we acknowledge in terms of the loss, but actually Matariki in its cluster is a whānau that actually is part of a much larger constellation in the sky. Matariki is one end, and Tautoru, or Orion's belt, is the other end of Te Waka o Rangi, Rangi's canoe. On board the waka, we have Taramainuku, who is a tohunga in our sky, and he, with his waka and a large net, comes down every night to collect our wairua, our spirits. Here in Aotearoa, we believe that our spirits, when our bodies have gone back to Papa, to Anuku, to the land, fly up to Te Rerenga Wairua at Cape Reinga, the northernmost point of our North Island. There they gather to wait for the net who will capture them. Now, of course, if you have been lucky enough to see Te Rerenga Wairua, we know that one of the last living things that our wairua touch is a pōhutu kawa tree, an ancient one. And they touch that before getting scooped up into the net. Now, this action by Taramainuku and Te Waka o Rangi happens every single night, all year round, for over 6 months. And during the period of April-May, we call that haratua in the Maramataka Māori. We wait and Matariki disappears from the naked eye in our skies. And then we wait again for Matariki to arise. When she does appear during those tangaroa lunar phases of pipiri, the sign of the new year, the sign of the first month of the year. We sing and we chant and we farewell our dead, kia whetūrangi tia rātou, knowing that they will become stars as Tara Mainuku allows his net to open so that the wairua become the stars in our sky, our loved ones looking down on us forevermore. All right. Need to get over my emotions so I can continue the show. Welcome back in. Ko te Ataahia tēnei. You're here at Kahurangi for session 4 on Arrow FM. I'm doing a Q&A today, and I've gathered some questions over the week about maramataka, as this is our last maramataka show of the season. And the next question is one that has come up time and time again, and the question is, he whakapapa tō matariki I te ao Māori? What is, or who is, matariki's whakapapa? So I just thought I'd bring in some of my knowledge after the gathering and collating that I've been doing for the last 3 years on my maramataka journey to share with you all today, and I'll reference where and when I can so that you can understand where I'm getting the information and maybe do a little bit of research and exploration yourselves. So, according to Te Ao Māori, ko te timatanga, we have the creation story, and I will go into that story in a little bit more detail at another time. But we start with te kore, and then te pō. So we talk about a void or an immensity or an intense darkness. And if you are not spiritually minded and maybe a little bit more scientific, you want to think about the very start of our universe, which was kind of this compacted energy and force. And within it, of course, in Te Ao Māori, we have two supreme beings. We like to think of them in English, Ranginui and Papatuanuku, deities or gods or elements who are embraced in their love for each other, in a tightness and in a grip. And it's a very sacred balance and energy, these two beings. A lot of people like to think about this as the first example of our cultural concepts of tapu and noa, of sacredness, the balance of two energies that exist, or two halves of a whole. Now, in this story, Ranginui and Papatuanuku have some children, and some people can recite about 8 of those children's names, and by children I mean ngā atua Māori. You will know them as the Māori gods or the Māori elements. Some experts, like Mark Kōpua of Ngāti Porou, can recite about 100 or more. What we do know is that these are the elements, the spiritual world or the natural world, that many Māori people can whakapapa to or trace their lineage to eventually. Now, I will skip part of this kōrero, but I do want to acknowledge that these atua are growing up within the space called io, this darkness, this void, this immensity, this intense love of mum and dad. Some of the siblings want to stay there forever and they're quite content, and some of the siblings, unfortunately, are ready for something more and something different, and a curiosity grows amongst them. The curiosity pushes them to the decision, after very long wānanga, of course, to separate mum and dad and to find out what's out there. Mm-hmm. So we have te kore te pō ka puta ki te ao marama. We have the Big Bang, and a separation of mum and dad is created by one of the sons, Tāne. Tāne, in my version of the story, gets down on his shoulders and uses the sheer force of his arms and his hands to push down on his mother. He flips upside down, and with the sheer force of his legs and his feet, he pushes up on his father, and they eventually let go of each other. Father flies upwards, becoming Ranginui, our sky father. Rangi, of course, is the word for sky in Te Reo Māori, and Papatuanuku, our earth mother, floats downwards to become the stability, our foundation, our land, Earth Mother. Papa, of course, is the Māori word for floor, or anything under our feet that gives us stability and the ability to be upright. Tāne then becomes the symbol of all living things, because we remember his feat, F-E-A-T, feat, in separating mother and father successfully. in the shape of a tree. We see his hands and fingers pushing down into papa, the roots of a tree, and his legs and other limbs pushing up towards rangi nui in the sky, the branches of a tree. And there are many sayings in te reo Māori that talk about as long as tāne is here separating mother and father, or keeping them separated, there is life. And I suppose, again, from a scientific point of view, as long as there are trees, we have oxygen, there is life. So whether or not it's the same story with a different perspective, aua. But what I love about the way we speak about the story in Te Ao Māori is we've personified everything. Everyone has Māori, everything has Māori, or vitality, or an essence of being, a character. Now, Tāne and many of his siblings are really happy with this new universe that they've created, so they become the different parts of nature. His brother Tangaroa, of course, envelops mum. I like to think of Tangaroa as a mama's boy. I've got one of those in my whānau, my boy Mario. He's a mama's boy, and he wraps up as close to mum as he can. Of course, Tangaroa is our god, or atua, o te moana, of the seas and the waterways. But unfortunately, some of the siblings are really unhappy. And this brings me into the whakapapa of Matariki, and then we'll talk about, maybe go back further in the whakapapa. However, in my version of the story, Tāwhiri Mātea is one of the older siblings, and this comes from the Mark Kōpua version through Mahia Atua, the work that he does up in Ngāti Tāwhiri Mātea, during the time of the big wānanga of the brothers, or of the siblings, is one who's very happy to stay with Rangi and Papa in the void, the immensity of Te Kore Te Pō, and he's advocating to stay with this and to not change. We don't know what's out there, etc. And so when the separation begins, he's absolutely traumatised. He's very grief-stricken, he's angry, and he's upset. Tāwhiri is, of course, a sensitive soul, and we can trace many of our emotions back to Tāwhiri Mātea and their own whakapapa. According to my story, he is so upset that his eyes start to burn, and he rips his eyeballs out and crushes them into small pieces, trying to express the grief that he's holding inside him, trying to externalise. Now, we do have practices of grief in Te Ao Māori. Some of you have probably heard our karanga and our wailing, our weeping, our snotty noses, and our tears flowing at tangihanga. Once upon a time, some people would take that to another level and would self-harm as a way of showing grief. And again, Tāwhiri Mātea gives us that practice. Now, in most of the storybooks, you will hear that Tāwhiri gets to that point in the story, and then he throws them up and they become the stars of Matariki, which is accurate. But I just don't think we should stop there. In my version of the story, we talk about how Tāwhiri has noticed that at night time, when his sibling Tamanui Te Rā, the sun, has gone to bed and it's pitch black, that is when Papa, his mother, is crying the most for her lover in the sky, because of course she can't see him. She looks up and she can only see darkness again and can't feel her lover near. And so she would cry. And we know when we walk outside at night time as people, as tangata, that that's when the humidity is highest, so we can feel her tears rising up to meet Rangi in the sky. And that was unbearable for Tāwhiri. So Tāwhiri, with his sensitive soul, decides to crush his eyes and tears up, knowing that they would sparkle, and he throws them purposefully to be caught up in te uma o Rangi Nui, Rangi Nui's chest. They, of course, become the stars of Matariki. Now, mata means gaze or face. Ariki is another word for atua, or God, in relation to Tāwhiri Mātea. So that's where we get the stars of Matariki. However, if I go back one little bit to the whakapapa of whetū, of stars in general, I've got a couple of versions here. Whakarongo mai. According to one version of whakapapa, Te whānau Mārama, the family of light, started with tango tango. Tango tango is blackness of the heavenly night, and tango tango marries Wainui, or has a partnership with Wainui, the ocean. Now, both tango tango and Wainui are siblings and are offspring of Rangi Nui and Papatuanuku. They then produce Te Rā, the sun, Te Marama, the moon, Ngā whetū, the stars, and Te Hinatore, the moonlight. Tāne took these offspring and placed them in their abodes in the sky. Now this version and part of the information comes from the Te Ara Online Encyclopedia. It is a Ngāti Awa version, but it's also one that I've heard Professor Rangimā Tāmua of Tūhoe reference and support. A Ngāti Kahungunu version, however, because we are here Ngāti Kahungunu, Ngāti Kahungunu version of this tradition says that Kewa went to the peak of Te Maunga Nui, the great Maunga, where he fetched Te whānau marama from the celestial guardian, Te Ahuru. Kewa carried the astronomical bodies in sacred kete, or baskets, planting them in the heavens. The basket holding the sun was named Raururangi. The basket carrying the moon was Te Kauhanga, and the basket containing the stars was Te Ikaroa, the Milky Way. Some stars, such as Atutahi or Canopus, very large and bright star in our sky, were put in baskets which hung to one side of Te Ikaroa, the Milky Way. And it is said that in one of Tāne's many journeys and explorations of the sky, he accidentally knocked this kete over and spilled everything, which is why when we look up directly into the Milky Way, it looks like the opening of a kete with all of the stars shining brightly within it. That long, nice kind of white, milky look of our Milky Way, Te Ikaroa. There are many other versions, of course, so I do encourage you to go hunting and researching, but I do want to bring you to Tāwhiri Mātea Meisirika's version of a song that acknowledges our great atua and ariki.
E hoki,
Kito,
maunga,
Maya,
kia,
Kia,
purea,
Pura,
koe,
Kwe,
ena,
Ina,
hau,
Hai,
o,
O,
Tāwhiri Mātea,
Lawhirumatia,
Tāwhiri Mātea,
Lawhirumatia,
Tāwhiri Mātea.
Lawhirumatia.
Hau, purea, e te hau, horoia, e te ua, purea, e te hau, te hau nui, hau roa, te hau tapu, hau roa, te hau ora, hau aroha, parera, te hau Makere ana ngā here.
I love that song so much. No mai hoki mai ki Kahurangi o Arrow FM ko Te Ataahia Hurihanganui tēnei. And we are finishing our Matariki and Maramataka theme in session 4. So welcome on in. We've had a few questions over the last week, and we were just talking about the whakapapa of Matariki and te whānau marama, the light, the stars, the sun, etc. in our sky. The next question that I've been asked, probably more in the last week as we've been in Matariki, is how many stars are there? Te Ataahia, how many stars are there? And it's usually followed by a part B, and the part B is it different depending on where you are in New Zealand? So I just wanted to let you know that I've been with Becky Bateman today, our local astronomer, Kahurangi, in our beautiful Wairarapa. And according to scientists, there are actually 500 stars in the cluster of Matariki. 500. You can't obviously see them all with the naked eye, but with binoculars at the right time in the morning, you can actually see about 100 of them. And I vouch for that because I saw about 100 of them through my binoculars. Not that I was counting this morning. However, according to Māori astronomer Professor Rangima Tāmua, someone who I respect greatly, and according to Mā Tauranga Māori, Matariki has 9 visible stars, and there have always been 9 visible stars to the naked eye in the Matariki cluster. Now, we need to be really mindful that Dr. Rangima Tāmua has been studying this and researching this using all sorts of means for the last 30 years. And as part of his research, Dr. Mā Tāmua found that some of his own tupuna were able to see 9 when they started their own study journey. The 9 visible stars include, of course, Matariki, the mother star, Pohutukawa, we've just spoken about, Tupuarangi, Waipunarangi, Waiti, Tupuanuku, Ururangi, Waita, and Hiwa Iterangi. Each star holds a certain significance over our well-being and environment, and seen from the Māori world view. Matariki tā puapua, matariki nāna i a wake te kai ki runga, matariki hunga nui, matariki ahunga nui. Te ope o te rua matariki, ka rewa a matariki, ka mau ka te hinu, ka rewa a matariki, ka rere te kanakana. Matariki is a star that signifies reflection, hope, our connection to the environment, and the gathering of people. Matariki is also connected to the health and well-being of people, and it is fitting to note here that this time last year, coming out of our COVID lockdowns, the biggest observation and prediction by our Matariki experts of the Matariki cluster was that Matariki, the mama star, was shining the brightest, and that well-being would certainly be one of the big themes of the season ahead. Pohutukawa. Tērā pohutukawa ka mōiri ki runga he pai whakamahara moa aku tau kahurangi kua Pi ratarata mai rā koutou hei whetū I te pō. Ko reko mai rā hoki koutou I te roki o ngā mahara mo ake tonu atu e. Pohutukawa is the star connected to those that have passed on. Waiti ki runga, waiti ki raro. E rere nei o wai hei mana pou mo te whenua, hei oranga mo te tangata. Hei ke te kai mā te iwi, ko ripo tonu nei, te ia o te awa. Mā reparepa na ngā roto, ko renga I te puna a tāne te waiora he koira. Waiti is connected with all freshwater bodies and the food sources that are sustained by those waters. Tērā te marae nui a kiwa, te ka napanapa nei I raro I a koe waita. Hia mai rā ki runga te tini a ikatere rukuhia ki tai, kohia ki tātahi, hei kai ma te tini o uta. Ka hiki mata te tapuai a tangaroa. Ko ia au nui, ko ia au roa, ko ia moana tu a rangaranga, ko ia moana I aio. Waita, Waiti's little twin, is associated with the ocean, with tangaroa, of course, and with food sources within it, our kai moana that we know Wairarapa is so rich in and so abundant. Waipunārangi. Hara mai te ko nehu nehu. Hara mai te hā ua ua. Hara mai te tarahi. Hara mai te patapata I āwha. Takataka mai I te ko manawa o te hei tapu. Whainumia e koe e Waipunārangi ka tupu te whenua, ka tupu te tangata. Waipunārangi is connected with the rain and with what falls from the sky. Tupu ānuku, ka pihinuku, ka pihirangi, ka makuru haere ake nei. Kia haumakoroa hoki te puke kia rongo I āhua mai tawhiti. Ngā hua o nukutu, ka aohia, nuitia, arārā, ngaki arārā tinaku. Hau haketia rā e te tau, he tau humi e. Tupu anuku is the star connected with everything that grows within the soil to be harvested or gathered for food. Tupu ārangi. Ngā ururu te wauku, mato te wauku, mā puapua te puhi kai ore e tau ai ngā tamariki a tāne, tērā koia te puanui. Tupu ārangi māu e mōmona ngā manu, ka mōmona ngā hua, ka puta, ka ora. Tupu ārangi is connected with everything that grows up in the trees, the fruits, the berries, and of course our manu, the birds. E ururangi, whakamāriretia te atua, matakere pō, koi, pūkerikeri mai, koi, hau roku mai, koi, huripari mai. Engari kia hau kōanga, kia ko tengi, kia purea ai au, kia whakahauratia ai au. Ururangi is the star connected with tāwhiri mātea and with the winds and storms. Hiwa nui, hiwa roa, hiwa pūkenga, hiwa wānanga, hiwa iterangi tēnei e korou o te manawa koronga, tēnei te āwhero o te mana konui, hora hia nui tia mai ngā hua tuawhiti mā tini o te tau. Purutia e au kia mau te angitu, tāwhia te mōho kia i tā. Ka puta ki te whaiao, ki te ao māramati, hei mauri ora kia tātou katoa. Hiwa i te rangi is my favourite star of our cluster, and it's a star connected with granting our wishes and realising our aspirations for the coming year. Our wishing star, which is so exciting because we even see it in our Walt Disney film Pinocchio, eh? So here's another Macy Dicker song. If you're enjoying Macy Dicker as much as I am, she has a full album all about the Matariki stars, and it's called Ngā Mata o Tāwhiri Mātea. This one here talks about all of them, and it's called Matariki I te pō. I hope you're enjoying yourselves here on Kahurangi. You're here with Te Ataahia, and we'll be finishing in the next 10 minutes or so sit back and relax. Actually, before I go into that, I do want to also say that at the end of every Kahurangi session, if this is your first time, we will be doing a few pānui. So if you've got any pānui for me for the next session, please do contact Aro FM through my program page, or Reorua Limited through my website, or of course on Pukamata Facebook. Here's Matariki I te pō.
Matariki I te tihanga Matariki, matariki te moa. Matariki te a. He hoki ka mahara. He anga whakamu. He anga whakamua. He oranga wairua. Ko matariki e ana.
Nau mai, hoki mai ki Kahurangi o Arrow FM, kei te whakarongo mai koutou ki a Te Ataahia Hurihanganui. Welcome back in. So another question that I get often is, Tahia, can you please bust the myths? And what's really lovely about that is our experts like Rangimata Moheni, Ho Te Renerere Atamaki, how we all get asked the same, not that I'm putting myself in with those beautiful kahurangi, but as educators we all get asked the same question. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the myth busting around matariki. The image of the stars. So it's really important that when we do Google, and Becky Bateman alluded to this morning in our event, if you are going to try and look for an image of matariki because either you can't see it or you haven't seen it before, just make sure when you're using Google that you're checking that it's the southern hemisphere view of matariki and not the northern hemisphere, and you'll notice that there's a good 90% of images from the northern hemisphere view, which will be backwards or upside down if you like. So that's really important if you are celebrating matariki here in Aotearoa, that is. The name Little Eyes, matariki or matariki, is often translated as little eyes, and there's absolutely no evidence in our oral traditions or our narratives to connect to that idea of little eyes. And I know from a meeting that I had recently with Dr. Rangimata that actually we should be pronouncing matariki as matariki, as they do in the East Coast in Ngāti Porou, Ngāti Ira land. Mata, of course, the gaze or the face, o te ariki, tāwhiri mātea. So little eyes, no, definitely not ours. The reference Seven Sisters, well, of course, the Seven Sisters is a Greek myth, and if you've been in any of my workshops, you know I'm pretty big on this because unfortunately many of our children's books talk about the Seven Sisters, and we've got lots of waiata about them. Kei te pai, but just bear in mind that the Seven Sisters is a Northern Hemisphere Greek story. It's not a Māori one, and it's actually connected to the 300, so if you're like me and quite enjoyed that film, probably for the wrong reasons, it's not ours, but it's a pretty choice story nonetheless. And actually for Te Ao Māori it's always been 9. The timing of matariki. Now, timing of matariki will change every year. So our public holiday next year, 2022, rua mano rua te kaumārua ko te hune, te rua te kaumāwhā, te rā te wā whakahirahira o matariki a te rātau. So next year our big celebration will be on June the 24th, but our lunar phases that line up to our atua are between the 21st and the 24th of June. So quite different to this year, and bear in mind that every year the matariki public holiday will shift to align correctly with our lunar phases. So that's something that's really dear to my heart, and those who are into maramataka will understand that as well. Whose mātauranga we should follow is another one. Well, of course, until now we didn't know what we didn't know, but we certainly have access to lots more information. So if you're interested in the resources that I use, I do have a list on my Facebook page, Reo Rua, so check them out and do some research. But certainly there are some great books out there. Living by the Stars is a great Facebook page, and so is Living by the Māori Moon. Weramu Tāwhai is the author of that one. Matariki o Puanga, well, of course, in some parts of Aotearoa, it is very hard to see matariki, so some iwi look to Puanga, which rises actually a little bit earlier than matariki, but more or less in the same period as as another tohu, another sign of the new year. And last but not least, what can we do to celebrate Matariki in the Maramataka? And I just wanted to end with this. Very recently, I wrote the curriculum for Rangitane Tumaira Trust's Kaumātua Reo program. And a couple of years ago, we rolled it out with Maramataka theme and topic, if you like. And my friend Eddie Hapeti and I wrote just a few ideas that may spark for you. So I'm just going to go through some of them. Plant something new in your garden, something in season. Research, read and learn about one fruit or vegetable that Māori would have planted at this time of the year. Either go out for a dive, go fishing or eeling, or learn about how one of these activities were affected by the stars of Matariki or by the lunar phases. So, of course, checking that you are doing those things in the right lunar phase. Number 4, use this time to pick, gather or harvest the end of the season's fruit or vegetables in your own environment, of course, or visit somewhere local, like our little farms. Or Parkvale mushrooms and learn from other experts about our kai here in the region. Number 5, celebrate the night sky by looking at the stars or learning about the stories. It's really easy to get hypnotised by all the learning on paper or on our computers, on our screens, and then we forget to actually look at where the knowledge really is, which is above our heads. So go out there and have a look. There are certainly a number of events coming up at Stonehenge, at Aratoi, our local museum, and of course through people like Becky Bateman, our Kahurangi here in Wairarapa. Tap into them. They're absolutely stunning ways to learn about what you're looking at. Number 6, attend a Matariki event or gather with whānau and play games, tell stories, share kai. I know that I've been doing that all week. I haven't actually cooked for about 7 nights, which is fantastic. And again, our ECE centres and our schools and high schools are absolutely leading in that space. Tēnā koutou. Number 7, visit your whānau's urupa or light a candle and reflect on the precious people in your life who have passed. Maybe use this time to tidy up the urupa, the cemeteries that people are buried in, to honour their presence still in our lives. Number 8, think about your aspirations, hopes and dreams for the year ahead. Maybe write a list of resolutions. And number 9, connect in with nature. Go for a hikoi, visit your tūranga waiwai, listen to the birds. There are a number of things we can be doing. One thing that my son Mario Kapua and I did on the 2nd, which was the first tangaroa lunar phase of Pipiri this season, was our hautapu ceremony. I'm not an expert in hautapu and I'm just learning, but I'm happy to share my learnings from the experience. Hautapu, Sophronia Smith, who was with us last week, spoke about is a chance to cook kai, normally in the ground, but the idea is a way to cook kai so that there is enough steam that will rise and go up to meet Matariki and her children in the sky. Now, when this is done, of course, you lift the lid of the kai. So, of course, if it's a hangi, you bring it out. The steam rises. You send your karakia and the names of the dead so that they become stars. You have another karakia or another moment that's about aspirations, hopes, dreams and wishes. And while I was standing there next to my darling Māori, it was really beautiful. I heard him say in Italian, that's his first language, Hiwa I te rangi, please take me back to Italy. So I wanted to finish our show today with a little bit of acknowledgement of my whānau over in Italy. Siamo molto con la nostalgia in questo periodo, perché ovviamente siamo molto fortunati di stare in questo terreno, in questa terra della Nuova Zelanda di Aotearoa, sapendo che tante persone in questo mondo stanno soffrendo ancora con tutti questi casini, delle cose ovviamente grosse come COVID. And so I'm just reflecting on the nostalgia myself and my whānau are feeling at the moment, knowing that we're very privileged and lucky here in New Zealand to not be so restricted in our movements and in our celebrations at this particular time of the year, particularly today because of my anniversary. So an acknowledgement of my connection to Italia, to my husband and my beautiful darlings on our anniversary, I'd like to play a song called Buonanotte, which is an Italian song. And this is the Nolan Reihania version, a late koro of ours in Te Ao Māori, from the Māori battalion. Many of our Māori tupuna came back from the wars with Italian songs because, of course, the connection between Māori and Italians was great. Whakarongo mai and enjoy.
Mo ai tāreane. Tātu ki a rātau waiata. E tere nōwi te mau i a mātau. Tā mātau tino waiata ko te Buonanotte nei, koena kia, tā mātau waiata pāti. Buonanotte. Buonanotte mi amore, buonanotte mio cuore, sogna tutte mie baci, sogna solo di me.
Buonanotte mio amore, ci vedremo domani per tornar più felici dal cuore. Buonanotte mio amore. Good night, my love. Good night, my heart. May you sleep peacefully and dream of me, my darling. Another beautiful connection that we will hopefully be talking about very soon in the near future. Tēnā koutou katoa ko Te Ataahia tēnei mo Kahurangi ki Arrow FM. Kia pai rawā tū tō koutou rā.